Hi everyone, and welcome to the third installment of the Autopilot Flight Director movie series of the IXEG 737-300. Today I'd like to talk about the flight director system of this aircraft. The flight directors hook into the flight control computers just like the autopilots do. There are two flight control computers A and B, and two autopilots A and B, and so also two flight directors A and B. You can see the two flight director switches here, and if I turn the left one on, you can see the little MA, the master light above it, light up. The first flight director to be turned on is always the master. If I turn on the second one, master stays on the left. Of course, if I turn off the left one now, the master moves over to the right one, because now that's the only flight director on. And if I turn on the left one again, the master stays on the right. You can see how that switches back and forth. It's important to know which one's master, because that determines which VOR ILS receiver and which altimeter the flight control computer will follow when it comes to altitude hold and ILS interception and that stuff. Now we'll do a takeoff. I'll arm the auto throttle again. You can see that arm light, you know that from the other movie. And I'm slowing down time a bit because things will happen pretty fast, and I'd like to explain. Here I'm advancing the thrust levers manually. I push the toga button, which is on top of the thrust levers. You can see the toga mode engage, N1 on the left side, and toga for the pitch mode, heading select for the roll mode. The power is set towards the limit, takeoff limit. This is not a reduced takeoff. And you can see the pitch bar still down at the bottom. At 60 knots, it will jump up to plus 15 degrees. Don't pull up yet, because you just scrape the tail. Wait until VR. At 84 knots, you can see the thrust levers go back to thrust hold, or the auto throttle goes to thrust hold. And as VR comes up, you can see them on the E80 speed tape. I'm pitching the plane up, and it will lift off at about 10-12 degrees. I pitch up to the initial 15 degrees as indicated by the flight director. Plane lifts off, I raise the gear, and now I'm just following the pitch bar. I'll just keep that centered, and it will command speed of V2 plus 15, V2 plus 20, somewhere in between. It's a complicated algorithm. At the thrust reduction altitude, 1500 feet, you will see that the auto throttle goes from TO into climb and will engage automatically the climb thrust, just as it did before on the manual takeoff. And you can see now that I will increase the speed as I want to accelerate. This is a flaps 5 takeoff, so I'm increasing speed here now to 225 knots. You can see the pitch bar goes down, which tells me, okay, pitch the aircraft down to accelerate, and I raise the flaps to 1, next logical step, and the plane accelerates. You can see the red and black flap placard limit bar here on the E80 speed tape come into view. 230 knots is the flap placard limit here for flaps 1, and I don't want to bust that, of course. I'm raising the flaps to up, and you will see that the red and black bar disappears here, and I'm coming up swiftly on the 5,000 feet that I set as an initial level of altitude to aid with a level of. I'm turning on the autopilot. You will see the FD gets replaced by the CMD command, which means the autopilot is in command now, and still 1,000 feet to go here. I increase speed a little further to 250 knots and start the turn towards the left, towards downwind heading, to land back on the runway that I just took off from. You can see the altitude acquire mode is active now, and the plane will level off at 5,000 feet. And the runway took off was 07 left, so I'm turning to 250 degrees, which would be downwind heading. There's the city of Barcelona, and you can see the heading is still at 305. I'll turn that in a minute. I put the gear to off and the auto brake to off also. That's what we do after takeoff. Here I grab the heading select again, move it to downwind heading. So I keep turning here towards the downwind heading, and I will jump to a beam position here in a second to just save some time. You can see the airport on the left side here. I'm still at 5,000 feet. I don't want to start the approach from 5,000, so I'm going down to 3,000 and engage the vertical speed to descend to that altitude, just as I did before. And you can actually see that I'm selecting the VREF, the reference approach speed for flaps 30. It's 130 knots in this case, and this will transfer to the E80i speed tape for approach later on. Here's the airport. I'm on a base heading basically, and if you want to, you can already see the glide slope coming in. That's a bad vector I gave myself, so I decide I'm arming the approach mode here. You can see glide slope and VOR lock is armed, but the plane cannot capture the glide slope before the localizer, so I need to descend a little more to stay below the glide slope. I don't want to intercept it from above. That makes for some nasty approaches. So I'm descending to 2,000 feet here. I'm almost out over the Mediterranean, so I can safely do so. And also keep an eye on the thrust mode annunciation. It's at climb, and at 2,000 feet it will change to GA for go around. Here's the localizer. I capture it, also capture the glide slope at the same time, which was close enough, and turn the heading bug to coincide with the localizer approach, so it points straight ahead. You can see the one channel there on the E80i, which alerts me that this is a one channel approach. It's not a dual channel autoland approach, and this is just a reminder. Now I'm dropping the gear and also select speed 135 knots. That's 5 knots above the VREF speed. That's what Boeing likes us to fly. And I will deploy the flaps on schedule. I was doing the approach with flaps 5. Now I was at flaps 5 before. Now I'm going to flaps 15. And now to flaps 25 and then flaps 30. That's the final setting that we selected. Also arm the speed brake here. You can see the green speed brake arm light just above the fuel gauges there, and at 1500 feet radar altitude you will see the flashing localizer and glide slope scales, a little ILS self-test that runs at that point in time. Now I want to fly this approach manually, so the first thing I'll do is I'll grab control of the thrust levers again. Well, they're not moving right now because of course the auto throttle is still in speed mode, and when I deselect that, then it lets me grab the thrust levers again. Now then, manual control, auto throttle is in arm. I mentioned that before. We like it there because it is a safeguard. I deselect or disengage the autopilot right now. You can see command changes to FD, flight director. Now I just have to keep those bars centered to stay on the localizer, and just to see as I do some sloppy flying here, bank to the left, the vertical bar immediately tells me, okay, bank right again to get back onto the localizer. What the are you doing? And so basically don't confuse the deviation bars here with the glide slope and localizer deviation bars. You can actually, if you keep them centered, they will fly you back onto the localizer even if the localizer itself is not centered. Of course, they just work the same in altitude hold and heading select, and just all the basic modes of the autopilot. Now I don't want to just land, that's kind of boring. I want to show you another flight director mode, that is the go around. As we get closer to the runway at about 200 feet, I will hit the toga buttons again, mapped to one of my joystick buttons, and that will engage the go around mode. It's a very convenient or very helpful mode in that situation. It's pretty hectic here at 200 feet. You can see I push the buttons now. The auto thrust engages GA. That's the go around power. It's not full power, it's just go around power. And you can also see that on the N1 indications there. I raise my gear as the climb rate is positive, and you can see the pitch mode is in toga again, and that just flies a safe speed relevant or according to the current flap setting. And you can see I'm climbing out nicely there. The roll mode is blank, which means it's just maintaining current ground track just straight ahead. And as I raise my flaps now, you can see that the speed cursor actually jumps up to the next reference speed for that flap setting. Convenient mode, you don't have to worry about commanding a speed increase, and you can just raise the flaps, especially if you're flying with dual channel. It's very nifty and just pitches the plane down to accelerate nicely all by itself. Coming up on the 2,000 feet that I set there, I re-engage the autopilot at levels of the airplane at the 2,000 feet, and the last thing to do is I select a convenient roll mode, in this case heading select, and now I'm in altitude hold and heading select, and can fly wherever I want. I hope you enjoyed this little review, and there will be another part fairly soon.